What's up? Ghost Fictions is here. This is a story where Izuku can copy others' quirk. An eye for an eye and the world goes blind. That was Izuku's favorite quote. All his old classmates never found out why. All of them but one. Bakugo soon found out very well why Izuku liked repeating that phrase. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations and support the amazing author Diamondragon23 for writing this story. Now, let's get into the story. Izuku was mugged a lot. It could have been that he just had that kind of innocent face that made criminals and bullies think he was an easy target. As they all soon found out, Izuku was no pushover. He was mugged so often that the police investigated him for vigilantism, but they soon found that he was just really unlucky. Or really lucky, at least from Izuku's point of view. He was currently pinned against a wall, a knife to his throat. "Try to move and you die, you got that?" the man asked. A trickle of blood dripped down Izuku's neck. He smiled. An eye for an eye. A minute later and Izuku was leaving the alleyway and calling the police. "It's me. Yes, it's the same alleyway as yesterday. I know, I'm sorry. He's unconscious. I don't know, he just collapsed. Yeah, I got grazed by his knife, but I'm fine. See you in a minute Tsukauchi." Izuku put his phone away, sitting on the curb. A single police car pulled up and one man stepped out. "You're pretty lucky that your quirk is more powerful than your mother's. If you could only pull things closer, you wouldn't be able to get out of these situations," Namasa said. Izuku nodded. "I know. I'm like the perfect unwilling vigilante." The mugger was bundled into the back of the police car. "I actually recognize him, we've been after this guy for a while. He's been slipping through our fingers because of his quirk. Some kind of heightened intelligence we think. Anyway, I'll drive you home. You're bound to get into at least 3 more muggings before reaching the end of the street." Izuku nodded, getting into the passenger side of Tsukauchi's car. Izuku waved to the detective as he drove away, walking back up to his apartment. Izuku greeted his mother, reassuring her that he was fine. He went upstairs and sighed, flopping onto his bed. "Entrance exams tomorrow," he muttered. Izuku was excited for the UA entrance exams. He wanted to become a hero, more than anything else. He was actually friends with UA's principal, Nezu. Izuku turned to his computer, bringing up his emails. "Speak of the devil," he muttered. "Hybrid Enigma. Greetings once again my friend, how have you been the past week?" Izuku smiled, typing out a reply. Analytical Bunny. "I've been well, although I have missed our chats." Hybrid Enigma. "I have also missed this. I'm happy to say that all preparations for the entrance exams have been finished, so we will be able to resume our regular schedule." Analytical Bunny. "Excellent news. Any tips?" Izuku chuckled darkly to himself. They had made a game of finding the other's true identity. It took Izuku a week to find out his friend was the smartest being on the planet. Nezu still hadn't found who Analytical Bunny really was. Hybrid Enigma. "Oh of course, you're a student. I really should have pieced that together by now." Analytical Bunny. "You really should Nezu." Hybrid Enigma. "I'll be keeping an eye out for you tomorrow." Analytical Bunny. "Just so you know, I will pass both exams into the hero course. You just need to figure out whether I scored the highest as I should or scored lower to throw you off." Hybrid Enigma. "A bet then." Analytical Bunny. "I'm listening." Hybrid Enigma. "If I find who you are before, let's say the sports festival, you must concede the competition." Analytical Bunny. "Winner takes all." "Interesting. Very well. However, if I win this bet on top of the original competition, no school for class 1A for an extra week after the sports festival." Hybrid Enigma. "Such high stakes. I could get in trouble for that from a certain grumpy homeroom teacher." Analytical Bunny. "You're the one that lifted them first. An eye for an eye." Hybrid Enigma. "So you like to say. Very well. I'll take those odds." Nezu left shortly after their weekly chess match, which Izuku won, adding to his increasing score of 63 to 45 in Izuku's favor. Izuku headed downstairs at his mother's call, sitting down for dinner. "How was school today? Did anything good happen?" Inko asked. Izuku shook his head. "The day was pretty normal. I am excited for the entrance exams though." Inko laughed. "I think we both know you'll pass just fine." Izuku nodded, wolfing down his food. Tomorrow was going to be fun. Izuku wandered into UA, walking alongside the rest of the hero hopefuls entering UA's auditorium. The greenette sat patiently in his seat and was slightly irked when Bakugo sat down next to him. "Don't talk to me and we won't have an issue," the blonde said. Izuku nodded, returning his attention to the stage below. President Mick stepped from behind the curtain, his blonde hairstyle easily recognizable, even from a distance. Hey listeners. Welcome to UA. Now, I'm sure you're all excited to get to the exam, but I need to explain a couple of things first. The white wall behind the hero turned out to be a massive screen, displaying 4 silhouettes with a simple numbering system. Now, the aim of the exam is to earn as many villain points as possible. How do you acquire villain points, you ask? By beating up the villain robots we've prepared, of course. Izuku quickly read the information on the pamphlet he'd found on his seat. The exam was quite simple: beat up the robots, earn points, some robots are worth more than others, avoid the obstacle robot, don't hurt the other examinees. Izuku grinned to himself. With his quirk, this would be a piece of cake. He didn't hear the rest of Present Mick's explanation, instead choosing to plan to himself. He stood along with his section of the hall and headed to testing area B. Izuku hopped off the bus 10 minutes later and began stretching his arms. He looked around at his competition. Exhausts in his legs, speed quirk. Belt with a lens in the center, some kind of belly button light. Laser perhaps. Pads on fingers, emitter of some kind. Influences objects outside of the body. Interesting. 5-point contact. Izuku could feel his quirk nestled in his chest, waiting to lash out at its first opponent. The massive doors to the exam side opened and Izuku sprinted inside, his quirk giving him a significant speed boost. The heroes of UA watched the screens with great interest. There appear to be a number of excellent applicants. Those with raw power, intel gathering and mobility are drawing ahead. Those with all three are outstripping even them. A small creature said. He tapped at a few keys on the pad before him. The applicant who intrigues me most, however, is this. The single image expanded to fill most of the screen on the wall, showing a robot's point of view. The robot in question lashed out at a green-haired boy who just came around the corner. Its fist connected and the boy's head snapped back. But that was all. The boy looked straight at the robot again and grinned. "An eye for an eye," he said. The feed cut out. "What happened? Who was that?" a cowboy asked. The creature smiled, bringing the boy's profile to his screen. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Absolute authority. He can push and pull objects of considerable size and weight around him. He can also increase the speed of his attacks with it by tugging parts of his body and even run faster than a few speed quirks by pulling his entire body forwards. It seems to me that he has an incredibly potent telekinesis quirk. However, something seems off, the animal said. The skinny blonde man and a muscular hobo each looked at the new screen showing Izuku with different thoughts. He's rational. He's strong. He's fast. He isn't flashy, he just gets the job done. He's smart. The hobo grinned. I want Midoriya in my class. The blonde skeleton was staring nervously at the greenette on screen. Is it possible? It could just be telekinesis. But if he has been given multiple quirks, then that would mean. But it could be skill, I can't just confront the boy. The animal chuckled. I had a feeling you'd say that, Izawa. I'll put him in your class. The animal looked back at the many windows on the screen, showing various applicants. Of the 48 intelligence quirks that applied, which ones are passing? Of those, which ones are viable? I will find you, analytical bunny. Izuku felt a shiver run down his spine. He grinned to himself. You'll never catch me, Nezu. You'll be concentrating on the intelligence quirks or the quirks that need a heightened intelligence to function well. Telekinesis isn't one of those, it just needs good concentration, not high intelligence. Izuku smacked away another robot, slamming the 3-pointer into a pair of 2-pointers, destroying all 3. Izuku lifted the rubble around him with his telekinesis and shredded a group of 1-pointers with a spinning shrapnel. He hopped from windowsill to windowsill, scaling the buildings with the aid of absolute authority. Izuku looked over the rooftops at the 0-pointer in the distance. He let out a low whistle. Damn, that's a little overkill. He grinned. I like it. Izuku sprinted on top of the buildings, using his quirk to run faster, jump further and land faster. He quickly reached the building right next to the robot, looking down at the road below. Anyone in the way? He muttered. Izuku spotted a brunette almost buried under a pile of rubble and wasted no time in pulling the concrete off of her and pulling her to her feet with absolute authority. She looked around in confusion, wondering what was going on. Run, Izuku shouted, waving to her when she looked up and jumping onto the robot's shoulder. He watched her flee the scene and immediately got to work. Which is to say, he ripped its head off with a twitch of a finger. Its body promptly collapsed just as Izuku floated to the ground using his quirk. The crowd just outside of the robot's kill zone stared in amazement. The practical exam is now over, President Mick yelled. Izuku heard the postman slide a letter through their door, so he pulled it towards him through the house and up the stairs to his room. There was something small, round and heavy inside the envelope, so he pulled it along with that. Izuku tore the letter open and let the disc drop onto his desk. A holographic screen projected itself onto his wall, showing the number 1 hero. "I am here as a projection," the hero said. "All might, but isn't this from you, eh?" The hero continued talking. "You may be wondering why I am here. Well, you are in fact looking at UA's newest faculty member. Now, I will be the one giving you your score, young Midoriya. You did superbly in the written exam, with full marks. Very well done. Your practical exam was almost as good as that, with 128 villain points. That is already enough to get into UA's hero course, but there was also a hidden scoring system. Rescue points. Due to your actions, young Uraraka was saved from the Zero Pointer's rampage. You also prevented more property damage by making the robot fall into a section it had already destroyed. You were awarded 70 rescue points. Adding that to your total score gives you an incredible 198 points. Welcome to your Hero Academia." The projection cut off. Izuku smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I did it." Izuku spent the 2 months between his acceptance and his first day training. He went on long runs, he lifted heavy weights both with and without his quirk, however lifting with his quirk required something much heavier than just his wrist weights. Izuku walked into UA nearly half an hour early, just to get a good idea of where everything was. He found 1A pretty easily, he could hear the angry screams of a certain rabid blonde from a mile away. Izuku opened the door and watched the spectacle before him. "Could you please take your feet off the desk? It's incredibly disrespectful to our upperclassmen, not to mention the people that made the desk," a tall bespectacled boy pleaded. Bakugo just snorted. "What school shoved that stick up your ass?" he asked. The boy straightened his back, adjusting his glasses. "Let us start over. I am Tenyu Iida of Same Private Academy. It's a pleasure to meet you." That last part didn't sound so sure, Izuku thought. Iida turned and noticed Izuku in the doorway. "It's you. I am Tenyu Iida of S." Izuku nodded, raising his hand. "I heard. I'm Izuku Midoriya, it's nice to meet you, Iida." Iida shook Izuku's hand and began to talk about the exam. "I saw you during the exam, you were incredibly skilled with your telekinesis quirk. I also saw that you took out the Zero Pointer to save that girl." Bakugo turned to scowl at Izuku, opening his mouth. Izuku smiled at the blonde. He shut his mouth and looked away. "He took out the Zero Pointer? What kind of crazy telekinesis does he have?" The other kids in the class began chattering amongst themselves. Izuku felt a presence behind himself. "It's you. The green boy." Izuku turned, smiling at the brunette. "Well done for making it in," he said. The girl smiled. "Thanks for saving me. That was pretty scary. If you're here to make friends, then I suggest you leave." Everyone but Izuku in the class jumped, staring at the yellow sleeping bag in the doorway. The bag stood up and opened, revealing a tired hobo man. "It took you all 4 seconds to quiet down. Only one of you noticed me in the first place. My name is Shota Izawa, I'll be your homeroom teacher for the next 3 years. Now, put these on and head outside." The man pulled out several PE uniforms from the sleeping bag. Laying them on the desk. He then left the room, wandering down the corridor. Izuku pulled a uniform into his hands and left the room after their teacher, briskly walking down the corridor after him. Somehow, to Izawa's surprise, Izuku was already at the field, with his PE clothes on, doing stretches. "I assume we're doing a test of some sort. You want to see how well we can use our quirks. Will we be doing the standardized fitness tests but with powers? That way we can compare how much they aid our strength." Izawa paused in shock, but quickly nodded. Izuku continued his stretches until the rest of the class arrived. "It took you all, minus Midoriya, 8 minutes to change and get down here. You'll need to be much faster than that if you want to last here. Every second is crucial. Now, onto what we'll be doing today. You are all familiar with the standardized fitness tests. You'll be doing them again, but this time with your quirks." Most of the class chattered amongst themselves excitedly. "Midoriya," Izawa said. Izuku stepped forwards. "What was your furthest throw in middle school?" he asked. "Around 65 meters," Izuku said. Izawa tossed him a small ball with sensors all over it. "Throw this as hard as you can using your quirk. Do what you like, just don't leave the circle." Izawa gestured to the circle on the field beside him. Izuku nodded, stepping forwards. "If I boost my throwing speed and then push the ball further with absolute authority, I can feasibly get it into space." Izuku pulled his arm back, then used his quirk to push his arm forwards faster than he normally could, then he grabbed the speeding ball and pushed it as far as possible. Izawa raised a tablet. "Several thousand kilometers and counting. Impressive," he said. "We get to use our quirks as much as we want?" a yellow-haired kid asked. "This is going to be fun," a pink girl said. Izawa immediately frowned. "You think this is fun? Then how about I make it even more fun?" Whoever scores last out of all of the tests is expelled, he said. A few of the students with non-physical quirks became worried. Why you can't do that, it's only the first day. It's not fair. Uraraka said. Villains aren't fair. Disasters aren't fair. It's up to heroes to push past that and make it fair. Plus ultra. Now, let's get started. Aizawa said. Throughout each of the tests, Izuku scored the best in each of them, even outlasting Iida in the endurance run or Asui in the long jump. As it turned out, Aizawa had been lying about the expulsion, much to the invisible girl's Hagakure. Izuku thought relief. Well, that's all for today. If you want to go home or stay here, I don't really care. Just don't disturb me. Aizawa crawled into his sleeping bag and rolled away. The day was fun. I wonder what we're doing tomorrow. Izuku found out exactly what they were doing tomorrow the next day. I am coming through the door like a normal person. The class stared at All Might, who was most definitely not coming through the door like a normal person. The number 1 hero strode across the room to stand before the class. Greetings fledgling heroes, I will be your hero informatics teacher this year. You can think of this as Heroing 101. Today, we will be doing this. The hero pulled out a cue card with battle training and big bold letters written on it. Izuku's classmates chattered excitedly to one another, while Izuku just stared in awe at his idol. Now, part of being a hero is looking like one, so you're going to need these. All Might pressed a button on a remote, opening up 20 panels on the wall. Take your numbered case and change into your costumes. Once you're ready, meet me at ground beta. All Might raced from the room, his heavy footsteps fading into the distance. So that was All Might, Izuku muttered. Around 10 minutes later everyone but Izuku was stood before the symbol of peace. Iida was in a futuristic set of armor, looking around for the unmistakable green hair. Where'd Midoriya go? Uraraka asked. Izuku came running through the corridor, adjusting his gloves. Am I the last one? Sorry, I've got so many bits and pieces. His costume was primarily a dark green jumpsuit and red utility belt, his signature bright red shoes still on his feet. Izuku also had long elbow-length gloves that had the fingertips missing on his right hand. Wow, your costume is really cool. Uraraka said. Izuku smiled, rubbing the back of his head. Thanks. I wasn't sure how I wanted to design it, so I just went pretty basic. What's up with the right hand though? She asked. Izuku smirked to himself. I'm not just going to reveal all my tricks. Although it's mainly for using touch screens. Or if I need to find a pulse or feel the temperature of something. Uraraka nodded understandingly. My quirk needs my fingertips bare, so I just went without gloves. Iida is completely covered though. She remarked. Izuku turned to the suit of armor standing next to him. Your costume looks similar to a hero I know about, he said. Iida nodded, striking a dramatic pose. I know exactly who you refer to. He is my inspiration, as well as my older brother, he said proudly. All Might finished his preparations and returned his attention to the class. Right, now that everybody is here, may I have your attention? Everyone's chattering ceased immediately, eager to hear what the number 1 hero had prepared for them. You will be put into pairs by drawing lots. Each pair will be assigned to either the villain team or the hero team title. Then, you will take turns facing off against one another within the villain's hideout. He began. Villains. You will be doing your utmost to defend a weapon within the base. If the heroes touch the weapon, you lose. However, if you wrap the heroes in capture tape or if time runs out for the heroes, you achieve victory. Heroes, you will be working to capture either the villains or the weapon. Are there any questions? Iida's hand shot into the air. Yes, young Iida. Is using lots really the best option? Should we be paired up using our quirks compatibility instead? Izuku decided to speak up. Heroes often don't get to decide who they work with in the field, so this could be replicating that. Iida lowered his hand. I had not thought of that. Please continue. All Might pulled out 2 boxes, pulling a ball from inside each. The first match was Izuku and Uraraka as the heroes against Iida and Bakugo as the villains. Memorizing the floor plan with so little time is difficult, Uraraka remarked. Izuku nodded, going through several strategies in his head at once. Bakugo will most likely come for me first. Will you be alright if I keep him occupied while you go after Iida and the bomb? Uraraka nodded, giving the green a thumbs up. That's fine by me. I'll do my best to capture the bomb quickly. Izuku nodded, smiling at his partner. Hero team, enter. All Might said through the comms. Izuku and Uraraka used a combination of their quirks to fly up to the 3rd floor. It's more likely it's hidden on a higher floor, but won't be at the very top, that's too obvious. As if to prove Izuku's point, Bakugo released a series of explosions from around the corner. Where are you, damn Deku? He screamed. Uraraka gave Izuku a silent thumbs up and crept away, while the greenette stepped out from his hiding place, whistling to catch the angry blonde's attention down the corridor. "There you are, you damn creep," he growled, stalking forwards. "Creep? That's pretty harsh coming from you, Blasty," Izuku chuckled. The Pomeranian just growled, charging towards Izuku, his hands behind him, propelling himself forwards with the blasts. Bakugo hammered his right fist into Izuku's stomach, making the smaller teen gasp, stepping back. An eye for an eye. Izuku slammed his elbow into the blonde's midsection twice as hard and with the aid of his quirk, launching his opponent away. Izuku stood back up, taking a ready stance, and waiting for the blonde to get to his feet. Bakugo choked on the air, staggering to his feet, glaring fearfully at Izuku. The greenette just stood in place, waiting for his opponent to charge. Bakugo wasted no time in blasting himself towards Izuku, spinning around to execute a flying kick. Izuku caught the kick on his forearm, grabbing the boot in his other hand and throwing the explosive boy back down the corridor. Izuku's earpiece crackled to life. "Midoriya, I found Iida, 4th floor, the bomb is at the back of the building in the big open room," she said in a hushed voice. Izuku hummed thoughtfully. "He'll probably avoid engaging in combat with you, instead running around to keep the bomb itself away from your touch. Side note, include something in your costume that can break concrete or tarmac to give you ammo. Try being sneaky for now, keep out of his sight, and keep quiet. There are pillars in that room, right?" Izuku didn't hear the reply, as Bakugo had decided on his next attack. "Ignoring me, huh? Well, I'm sure you know how my quirk works, being such a stalker and all. I sweat nitroglycerin, which I can ignite on my palms. That's what makes my explosions. But what do you think happens if a ton is gathered up and detonated at once?" Bakugo asked, raising one of his gauntlets that were definitely not for decoration. Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "And I assume you haven't the slightest idea of how my quirk works?" he asked. Bakugo snorted. "Why should I care? You can move shit about with your mind, boo fucking who." He raised his right hand to the pin on the left gauntlet. All Might chose that moment to intervene. "Young Bakugo, stop. That attack will kill him." Bakugo grinned fiercely. "He'll be fine as long as he dodges." Bakugo pulled the pin, grinning at his opponent. Until of course, the massive explosion changed course and engulfed the blonde instead. Izuku just stood there, his right hand raised, his quirk controlling the flames. "My quirk is called Absolute Authority for a reason. Never use a large-scale attack on a telekinesis user if you don't know whether they can turn it back on you or not," Izuku sighed. The flames quickly died out, leaving a toasty Bakugo with a slightly burned costume. "You motherfucker," he coughed out. Izuku wrapped his capture tape around the blonde, just as All Might called out the hero's victory. "Hero team wins." Izuku looked up in confusion. "Uraraka must have captured or incapacitated Iida just as I did, or she might have gotten the bomb at the perfect moment." Izuku dragged a semi-comatose Bakugo back to the observation room. He was quickly joined by Iida and Uraraka. "Did you capture Iida or the bomb?" he asked. Iida looked down shamefully. "I caught Iida. He was monologuing, so I just jumped him with the capture tape. I was just about to touch the bomb when you captured Bakugo." "What happened to him, by the way?" Uraraka asked cheerfully. "Karma," Izuku said simply. Izawa walked into homeroom and was pleasantly surprised when everyone was already in their seats and waiting for him. "Good, you've learned. Anyway, you'll be doing something important today." The class tensed up. "You'll be picking a class representative," he said with a dead expression. Izuku winced as practically everyone leapt into the air, clamoring to be chosen for the position. "I don't care how you choose, just do it before homeroom ends, I have another announcement," Izawa said, squatting in the corner of the room for a quick nap. Iida quickly quieted the shouting and proposed an idea. "How about we vote? I know we do not know each other very well, but doesn't that prove that anyone with more votes is best suited to the position?" The class agreed with his reasoning, and everyone wrote their vote on a slip of paper. Izuku voted for Iida. And the results are: Midoriya in first, with 5 votes, and Yaoyorozu in second with 3 votes. That means Midoriya is class rep, and Yaoyorozu is vice rep. "Who the hell voted for Deku?" Bakugo screamed. "It's better than voting for you," a blonde boy with a lightning streak said. Izuku sighed. "I'm not cut out for class rep." Izawa stood back up at the podium. "Alright, now that is over with. You'll be going off campus to a special facility supervised by myself, All Might and one other hero for rescue training tomorrow morning. That will be all." Izuku sighed, placing his tray on the table next to Uraraka, opposite Iida. "I don't know if I'm the right person for class representative," he said, slumping down in his seat. Uraraka laughed. "You were amazing in the battle trial, and you came first in the entrance exams. I'm sure you'll do amazing." she said. Iida nodded in agreement. I agree, that is why I voted for you after all, he said. Izuku sighed, looking down into his Katsudon bowl. The piercing alarm cut off any further conversation. Warning, this is a level 3 alarm. Panic quickly spread amongst the students in the cafeteria. Iida caught the arm of an upperclassman. What is level 3? He asked. It means someone has broken onto the main campus, this has never happened in all my years here, he said, pulling away. Izuku was squashed between the window and a crowd of bodies. The greenette frowned at the chaos outside. Are they reporters? How did they get in? Some kind of disintegration quirk it looks like. The gate is just a pile of ash. But would a reporter really risk losing their job by using such an easy to identify quirk? Then it's someone else. Why the main gate though? Why not burrow under or through a section of the wall? It's a distraction. They're on campus, looking for something in particular. A student. Information. Izuku muttered to himself. The crowd had already dispersed and calmed down, thanks to Iida. Later, in homeroom, Izuku decided to make his first and last announcement as class rep. I think Iida should have the position of class representative. I'm sure you all saw how he handled the situation, which is why I think he's perfect for the job. Are there any objections? The class shook their heads. Iida will be a great class rep. Yeah, go emergency exit Iida. Emergency exit. Iida swapped places with Izuku. Thank you everyone. I'll do my best to be a great class representative. The next day Izuku was stood outside the bus watching Iida order everyone into lines, giving them the seating plan he'd made. It's not that kind of bus. Izuku muttered to himself. Iida nearly cried when he got on last and found out his seating plan was useless. Don't worry about it Iida, Izuku said, patting his shoulder. Everyone chatted amongst themselves during the bus ride. Izuku sat thinking to himself, trying to figure out what really happened yesterday afternoon. Midoriya. Asui said. Izuku turned to the frog girl, smiling slightly. What is it Asui? Call me Tsu, she said. Izuku nodded. I often say what's on my mind, she continued. Your quirk is quite strange. Izuku tilted his head. How so? He asked. Tsu put a finger to her lips. Well, you say it's telekinesis, but I've never heard of a telekinesis quirk that can control elements or increase a person's strength and speed, she explained. Izuku laughed. Well, there's got to be a first time for everything. My quirk is stupidly powerful, I will admit that. And it's mega flashy too. Perfect for hero work not like my hardening, Kirishima said. Izuku shook his head, a grin on his face. I think your hardening is awesome. Definitely a heroic quirk, he said. The bus slowed to a stop just as the conversation ended and Alizawa got up from where he had been sleeping, ushering the students off of the bus. Uraraka almost screamed in joy when she saw the other hero that would be teaching them today. It's 13, I love 13, she said. Izuku chuckled to himself. Hello everyone. Welcome to the USJ. 13 said. Izuku looked up and sure enough, there was a huge domed building that looked similar to Universal Studios Japan. This is the unforeseen simulation joint. Not Universal Studios then. Star. Today, you will be doing rescue training. Now, come on inside and I'll explain today's activities to you all. 13 led the students inside, alongside an irritated Izawa. 13 held up 3 fingers to their homeroom teacher, muttering something to him. The space hero turned back to the class. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, my quirk is called Black Hole. It sucks in and destroys anything it comes into contact with. You've used it to save people from disasters hundreds of times, Uraraka said. The hero nodded. Indeed I have. However, if not used carefully, my quirk can very easily harm or even kill people. In Izawa's test you found the limits of your powers. In All Might's lesson, you learn to fight with your quirks. Here, you will be learning how to save people with them. The class gave 13 a round of applause, but was cut short by a surge of electricity around the lighting system, cutting out the main lights, along with the sensors. A purple mass formed in the courtyard below the stairs, drawing the students' attention. A single hand pushed through the purple mist, pulling it aside and letting a man through. The portal, Izuku thought. Many more dangerous-looking people stepped out of the portal, forming a line beside the first man, who was covered in dismembered hands. Is this like the entrance exam? Has the lesson already started? Kirishima asked. No, those are real villains, get back. Aizawa yelled. Be villains. Kaminari muttered. 13, protect the students. Get everyone outside. I'll hold them off. Izuku stepped forwards. Mr. Aizawa, your fighting style is more suited to one-on-one fights and surprise attacks. If you go down there. Aizawa pulled his goggles over his eyes, clutching his capture weapon in his fist. You can't be a hero with just one trick. Eraserhead leapt from the stairs, charging the villains below. Izuku watched several shooting quirks get ready, but then ultimately fail in the face of Izawa's own quirk. The Greenette followed his classmates, ushering them along. The same purple portal from earlier appeared before them, blocking the path to the exit. It formed into a thin shape, manifesting glowing yellow eyes. Greetings. We are the League of Villains. It may be presumptuous of us, but we have let ourselves in so that All Might, the symbol of peace, can take his last breath. 13 stood before the students, her arm extended, the cap on her pointer finger open. I will not let you stop us, she said. Bakugo and Kirishima jumped forwards, only angering the portal user with a mutter of "that was close" before he transported them away. I'd almost forgotten, you may be students, but you are excellent golden eggs. It is my job to scatter you and torture you all to death. The villain surged forwards, and Izuku fell through a portal. The Greenette's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Izuku fell into the flood zone of the USJ, and he used his quirk to fly into the deck of the ship, avoiding any of the villains in the water. He was soon joined by Tsu and Mineta. Izuku looked into the water. 30 villains this side of the boat. 60 total. That's perfect. Izuku reached out with his mind, grabbing any villains he could find in the water and lifting them up into the air, slamming them together into a mass of limbs and squirming bodies. Some of them should be unconscious. Tsu, take Mineta to the shore and head back up the stairs to the entrance, okay? I'll deal with the villains. Tsu hesitated but nodded, trusting her classmate. Don't worry, Kiro. Make sure you stay safe. Izuku gave her a thumbs up, watching her dive into the water and drag Mineta away. Izuku looked up at the villains. Let's see. He muttered with a feral grin. 5 minutes later, and Izuku had restrained and knocked out every one of the villains in the flood zone. He was now peeking over the small ridge at the courtyard. Izawa was being held down by a massive beaked monster. Izuku frowned. Izawa's quirk didn't work on it. Either it's just that strong, or… he muttered to himself. Izuku looked back up, right into the red eyes of the hand villain. The villain clamped his hand down on Izuku's forearm, making the fabric of his costume crumble and the skin beneath crack. The villain giggled to himself. Izuku laughed in the villain's face, grabbing the villain's forearm in his right hand. An eye for an eye and the world goes blind. The villain's forearm began to turn gray and small cracks began to inch across his skin. Izuku's smile was suddenly much more predatory. But how about an eye for something else? The villain jerked away, his eyes blown wide behind the hand on his face. He stared down at his forearm in horror, scrambling away from the green-haired boy. Then Nomu, he screamed, falling back onto his butt, clutching the decaying arm. Izuku was backhanded by the beaked monster and sent flying into the stairs at the other end of the courtyard. Midoriya. Izawa shouted, getting up from the bloodied floor and chasing after the teen. Izuku pulled himself out of the new crater in the staircase, his skin stitching itself back together. He was laughing hysterically. Amazing. I already had powerful healing quirks, but this regeneration is on another level. Izuku exclaimed. And multiple quirks. What, does someone evil have a quirk like mine? I wonder what kind of quirky things he can do. The Nomu, upon realizing Izuku wasn't dead, charged again. The hand villain watched in horror as Izuku was smacked into the wall, but didn't take any damage this time. Shock absorption. I've got a couple, but nowhere near as powerful as this. It's more of a shock displacement though, now that I think about it. Izuku observed the shockwaves passing out behind him every time the Nomu punched him. The strikes were getting weaker though. He let out a low whistle. 3 super strength quirks. That's insane. And 2 ultra speed quirks. With this combination, you could be on par with All Might. The Nomu promptly collapsed under the strain of Izuku's quirk. Izuku glared down at the creature. 59 punches. An eye for an eye. The Nomu's upper half blew itself apart. The Misty Man took that chance to appear. Shigaraki, we must retreat. One of the students escaped and is calling for backup. The Purple Mist Man hesitated. What happened to the Nomu? He asked. Shigaraki ran towards Kurogiri. Open the warp gate, Kurogiri. Get us out of here, he's like Sensei, he can steal quirks. Kurogiri's eyes widened and he quickly made a portal, stepping through alongside Shigaraki, who threw himself through the portal. Izuku sighed in relief, healing his decayed arm. Midoriya. What the hell was that? Izuku looked up at Izawa, noting his various injuries. I promised to explain later, but the short story is I have multiple quirks. Do you want me to heal your injuries? Izawa paused warily, then relented, nodding his head. Izuku placed his hand on Izawa's arm, willing his wounds to heal. It took a couple of minutes, but Izawa was quickly good as new. Around half of the students are scattered around the facility, but they're all heading back now. Except Yaozu, Jiru and Kaminari. You might want to go and check out the mountain zone. Also, please keep my quirk status a secret. Izawa nodded, racing off in the direction of the mountain zone. Izuku searched around inside himself. Alright, an uber powerful regeneration quirk. I'll merge that with my self-healing quirks. The strength boosters can go into the super strength pile and the speed quirks into the super speed pile. Shock absorption. I'll jumble my other shock dampeners with it. Now I'll try activating them. Izuku activated his strength quirk, feeling his muscles bulge and tighten beneath his skin. Whoa. This feels like All Might level strength. Those strength enhancers were stronger than I thought. He muttered. Izuku let the strength quirk go, instead pulling his newest, most dangerous quirk to the surface. Some kind of decay. He murmured. Izuku put it away, letting the quirk sink back into his chest. He'd experiment with it later. The greenette walked up the stairs, coming to the top and walking the short distance to the huddled group of students. Is everyone okay? He asked. Uraraka shook her head. I don't know. Everyone else is still scattered around the facility and 13 is badly injured. Izuku approached the space hero. I don't think it's really as bad as it looks. He began. The rest of the students looked expectantly at him. It's mainly her costume that was obliterated, her back had small pieces pulled off, which would have put her in a great deal of pain, but nothing vital was damaged. There's a lot of blood, but that's just because of the amount of wounds, and she probably passed out from the pain. 13 will be fine. She'll be sore once she wakes up, but if anything she will probably be able to get up and heal in a couple minutes with Recovery Girl's help. It was at that moment that the door burst open. Do not be afraid, students. I am here. Izawa is in the mountain zone helping the students there. I was in the flood zone, everyone else got out okay. I don't know about the other zones though, All Might, they're the ones that really need your help. Izuku said. Thank you, young Midoriya, I shall return in a moment with your classmates. The hero ran off at an incredible speed. Not as fast as my speed quirk amalgamation though. All Might returned moments later with Tokoyami and Koda in his arms. Once they were set down, All Might disappeared again in a blur, off to rescue his remaining students. Izuku lifted the injured 13 with his quirk. Everybody go outside. The rest of the teachers will be here soon, but it's still safer to wait outside. All Might will bring the others up here and clean up the rest of the villains. Izuku's classmates nodded, getting up and walking to the wide open doorway. Izuku levitated 13 through the door and set her gently onto the grass outside. He turned back to the staircase in time to see Izawa, Yaozu, Jiru and Kaminari reach the top. All Might is here, he's helping the rest of the students. The only ones unaccounted for so far are Todoroki, Hagakure, Ajiro, Bakugo and Kirishima. The rest should be outside at the moment. 13 is injured, but it's just a lot of flesh wounds, she'll be fine. Iida escaped earlier, and the rest of the heroes will be here shortly. Izuku said. Izawa nodded, standing alongside Izuku as they watched the villains below get struck down by a furious yellow blur. The rest of the students had been cleared by Recovery Girl, and after a short interview from a detective, had gone home. Izuku was the last left behind, having sent his mother a text saying he'd be talking to the heroes a little while longer. The hero in question was Izawa. The detective had already headed back to the USJ to speak with the officers there. Recovery Girl had been amazed that both Izuku and Izawa had escaped the battle unscathed. Izawa sat at his desk, staring at the green-haired boy before him. Izuku sighed, delving into his explanation. Absolute authority is not a quirk. It's an amalgamation of multiple quirks I've acquired from muggers over the years. Izawa's stare widened. Absolute authority is composed of 12 telekinesis quirks and 16 telekinesis copy quirks. A copy quirk is where I don't want to take a quirk completely, but I clone its abilities. It's not as strong as the original, but it can be strengthened with use. Izawa nodded, keeping silent for now. Technically it is just one quirk, as all the quirks and copies that make it up can no longer be separated from one another. It can be added to with more quirks and copies though. Izawa decided to chime in. So it's basically the strongest telekinesis quirk the world has ever or will ever see? He asked. Izuku nodded. And it's one of my weakest quirks. I've got a strength enhancer, a super speed quirk, a hyper intelligence quirk, a shock nullification quirk, an ultra regeneration quirk, a swift healing quirk, and many other assorted powers and abilities. Every single one is made up of at least 10 of its kind, all fused together into the ultimate version of itself. Some of my newer or rarer powers are weaker, but only in the face of my true abilities. So your birth quirk lets you take or clone other people's quirks? Izawa asked. Izuku sighed. Not quite. My original quirk, my birth quirk. The most powerful quirk in my arsenal. It was not registered, as I used it to clone my mother's quirk by mistake, which is why it is believed to be telekinesis by everyone else. My real quirk's name is an eye for an eye. You know the old saying? Izawa nodded, scratching his chin. Didn't it go? An eye for an eye and the world goes blind. Yes. My quirk lets me take an eye for an eye. Or an eye for something else of my choosing, like a quirk. Remember, back in the USJ, when the Nomu just exploded. Izawa nodded hesitantly. That was its 52 hits rebounding onto itself. It struck me 52 times with strength-enhanced punches. Once I took its shock displacement and regeneration quirks, I let the damage rebound. That was the result. So if I were to punch you right now. Izuku smiled. You'd be the one feeling it. And you'd get the injury, if I so desired. I can also use my shock nullification to just negate the damage and pain you deal to me, meaning you're pretty much punching yourself. The damage can also accumulate until I let it out. Izawa sighed, sitting back in his chair. Alright, problem child. I want you to make a list. Every single quirk you have and the number of its kind inside it. The quirk's abilities and limits too. On my desk when you get back to school. I will show nobody but the principal. I need it to be able to train you properly. Alright. Izuku nodded. That's fine. I don't mind the rest of the faculty knowing if they ask, but I'd like to keep it from the rest of the students until the sports festival. Izawa chuckled. You want a big reveal? He asked. Izuku nodded, grinning. I'll get that list put together for you tonight. Izuku stood up from his chair, grabbing his bag. Izawa rolled himself into his sleeping bag. See you next week, kid. I look forward to finding out just how powerful you really are. A few hours later, after much fussing from his mother and dinner, Izuku headed up to his room and got to work on his list. Absolute authority. 12 quirks, 16 copies. Weight limit. Unknown. Can lift several buildings with ease. Strength enhancer. 25 quirks, 33 copies. Limits unknown, several powerful quirks recently acquired. Stronger than All Might. Super speed. 22 quirks, 37 copies. Limits unknown, several powerful quirks recently acquired. 1000 meters in an instant at last test. Hyper intelligence. 13 quirks, 20 copies. 100% scores on university papers. Solve equations by Nezu in minutes. Shock nullification. 16 quirks, 2 copies. Limits unknown, single powerful quirk acquired recently. Could take several full power hits from All Might before even feeling a tickle. Ultra regeneration. 21 quirks, 16 copies. Limits unknown, single powerful quirk acquired recently. Can regenerate limbs in seconds with ease. Automatic. Swift healing. 10 quirks, 8 copies. Quickly heals target with physical contact. Stamina is transferred from user to patient. Entire limbs regenerated in minutes. Perfect harmony with energetic. Energetic. 43 quirks, 46 copies. Stamina quirk. Insomnia quirk in there too. Don't need to sleep when activated, massive stamina pool. Never reached limits, even when training for 24 hours without rest for testing. Perfect harmony with swift healing. Optics. 58 quirks, 44 copies. Vision enhanced, can magnify distant objects, night vision, thermal vision, X-ray vision. No limits. Explosive kinesis. 13 quirks, 198 copies. Made of fire quirks and explosive quirk copies. Can freely control flame and generate explosions from hands. With regeneration and shock nullification, normal drawbacks nullified. Note. All copies of same quirk. Hydrokinesis. 28 quirks, 33 copies. Freely control most liquids, not limited to water-based liquids. No drawbacks. Electrokinesis. 21 quirks, 22 copies. Freely control electricity and call down lightning at will. Can burn from overuse. Warp Gate. 0 quirks, 1 copy. Villain Kurigiri's quirk. Unusable. Warp Gate itself is an amalgamation of many quirks. May be able to use with further practice. Decay. 1 quirk, 1 copy. Shigaraki's quirk, both copied and taken in quick succession. Can decay objects when touched. Experimentation needed. 0 gravity. 0 quirks, 1 copy. Echako Uraraka's quirk, copied during the battle trial. When all 5 fingers touch an object, the gravitational pull of the earth has no effect on it. Causes nausea, can be nullified with practice. Compatible with absolute authority. Combine or refine. Soar. 13 quirks, 13 copies. Flight quirk. Wing mutations optional. No limits. Erasure. 0 quirks, 3 copies. Aizawa Sensei's quirk, copied in class during intimidation tactic. Can erase a person's quirk by looking at them. Causes dry eye. Compatible with optics. Combine or refine. Note. I copy quirks on reflex, I can delete the copies if you want me to. Voice. 0 quirks, 12 copies. Present mix quirk, copied from the auditorium and English classes. Makes voice loud. Really loud. Sore throat if used for really long. 6 sense. 24 quirks, 25 copies. Awareness and reflexive quirks. Area around user is always monitored, cannot be jumped or surprised by enemies. Blade. 10 quirks, 9 copies. Create blades anywhere on my body, claws, horns, teeth, Wolverine claws, anything. Slightly painful. Telepathy. 5 quirks, 5 copies. Speak in people's minds, and vice versa. Hold conversations with people without opening our mouths. Headache for using too long. Compatible with absolute authority, but kept separate. Inventory. 1 quirk, 1 copy. I have an inventory. Limited space. Pocket dimension for things. Mainly keep school supplies and lunch money inside. That's why I don't have a school bag. Quirk note. 13 quirks, 20 copies. Read details of a person's quirk. Lie detector. 0 quirks, 3 copies. Detective Tsukauchi's quirk. Cannot be lied to without my knowing about it. Testing needed. Mind control. 28 quirks, 28 copies. Never let a criminal go with a mind control quirk. Dangerous in the wrong hands. Take over a person's actions with a touch or a look. Limit. 20 people at once. Impression. 1 quirk, 1 copy. Can mimic or create any voice I want. Gollum is fun. I just think it's neat. No known limits. Resistance. 34 quirks, 37 copies. Resistant to extreme temperatures, poisons, quirk effects and mind control. Testing needed. Eye for an eye. Original quirk. Any damage received can be reflected onto the attacker. If harmed in any way, rather than dealing damage back, something else can be taken instead. Quirks are energy known options. Reverse is also true. Example. Healed by recovery girl. Can strengthen her quirk by adding copy. No limits. Izuku leaned back at his desk. That had taken a while. He grabbed another piece of paper and wrote out a training plan for the next week off. Izuku walked into 1A a little early as to give Izawa his list. He reached into his inventory and pulled an envelope addressed to Izawa from it. Said hero rolled out from under his desk. "That the list?" he asked. Izuku nodded, handing it to his exhausted homeroom teacher. "My mother and I are the only others who know about my true quirk. Also, I'd like to ask if you could withhold my quirk information from Principal Nezu until after the sports festival." Izawa sighed, opening the envelope and reading through the contents, his eyes widening every few seconds. "Can I ask why?" Izuku chuckled. "We know each other online, and I'm trying to win a bet. He'll figure out who I am during the festival, which means I win." Izawa sighed, already contemplating the headache he was going to get. "You already have zero gravity and explosion. Are you going to be copying any more of your classmates' quirks?" Izawa asked. "Most likely," Izuku said. "I tend to avoid mutations like Jiru's and Shoji's quirks, and mainly focus on emitter or augmentation types that can go unnoticed. I'm thinking about half hot half cold, electricity, possibly engine, as I can keep the mutation hidden by burying that aspect beneath other speed quirks. Creation is a definite aim, it's an incredibly versatile quirk, no matter if it's a weak copy. Hardening would be good too. Invisibility could be useful, alongside Anavis. Sugar Rush doesn't go well with many of my quirks, so I might not copy Satu's quirk," Izuku muttered. Izawa sighed, glancing further down the list. Erasure. He looked up to see Izuku's hair floating about, his eyes shining red. "Yup. If a quirk is used on me I can copy it too. Erasure has 3 copies, so it's about 1.5x as strong as your erasure. Meaning that it requires slightly less effort to use, activates faster, and I can keep it up for longer. I can get rid of it if you want though, sir. I understand if you're uncomfortable with someone else in possession of your quirk," Izuku said. Izawa shook his head. "It's best if you have all the quirks you can at your disposal. In fact, I'll use my quirk on you from time to strengthen you up. Having another hero around that can negate quirks could be useful. No using erasure during the festival though." Izuku nodded, walking over to his seat as Izawa studied the remainder of the list. Todoroki chose that moment to enter the classroom, silently taking his seat. The classroom quickly filled up soon afterwards, Uraraka and Iida approaching Izuku to chat as they waited for the first bell. "Alright, now that everybody is here, settle down," Izawa said. He glared around the classroom, his quirk activated, watching everyone not seated scramble to their desks. His gaze passed over Izuku twice. "Thanks, sir. As I'm sure you're all aware, the sports festival is coming up soon." A few people spoke up at that. "The sports festival? After USJ? Are you sure we should still be doing this after the attack?" Izawa nodded slowly. "We are only going on with the festival as a show of strength. Security will be significantly better than previous years. You have the next 2 weeks to train however you see fit. Unlike the previous week off however, you will all have full access to UA's facilities and can spar together with Quirks as long as you are on campus. Are there any questions? Everyone shook their heads. Then you are all dismissed. If anyone needs help with training, go bother someone else. Izawa rolled into his sleeping bag and under his desk in one swift movement. Izuku noted that he took the list with him, as well as an empty schedule of some kind. The majority of 1A decided to train together, and Izuku acquired engine, electricity, creation, invisibility, anivis, hardening, and several more zero-gravity copies. After 2 weeks of sparring and training alongside the majority of his classmates, Izuku had ridiculously strong versions of his classmates' quirks. Engine did not require a visible mutation to aid his speed quirk, it augmented his amalgamation, improving the proficiency of every quirk mixed into one. Electricity greatly improved his electrokinesis. Creation went very well with his intelligence quirks and allowed him to create large objects in a matter of seconds, using very few of his lipids. Invisibility could be turned on and off and could affect different body parts and any objects Izuku was touching, including his clothes. Anivis let Izuku understand and speak any language, not just the languages of animals. Hardening was the crown jewel of his classmates' quirks however. Izuku could become an impenetrable wall for as long as he wanted. It was very difficult to actually move anywhere, but when he used hardening, Izuku could not be harmed. Izawa, true to his word, had used erasure on Izuku a few times every day, quickly improving the Greenet's version of the quirk. Unfortunately, neither Bakugo or Todoroki wanted to train with the rest of the class, instead choosing to train their quirks alone, away from where Izuku could copy them. Inko helped Izuku improve absolute authority by bonking him with floating objects around the house. Izuku turned on his laptop, opening his emails. Hybrid Enigma. Tomorrow is the day of the sports festival. I know you are in 1A, however I do not know which student for certain. Analytical Bunny. I'll reveal myself to you tomorrow, but by then it'll be too late for you. Hybrid Enigma. Gyarozumomo. Analytical Bunny. Nope. Hybrid Enigma. Drat. Very well, I concede our game. As much as it pains me to admit, you have bested me intellectually Bunny. Analytical Bunny. Izawa has some information on me for you tomorrow. He's going to give you my list at some point during the festival. You'll figure it out before then though. Hybrid Enigma. I look forward to your performance. Would you care for tea over chess once the festival concludes? Analytical Bunny. I would like that. See you tomorrow Enigma. Hybrid Enigma. Very well Bunny. Izuku walked up onto the platform beside Midnight. Because he scored highest on the entrance exam, he was chosen as the student's representative and was expected to give a speech to start the festival. Izuku walked up to the microphone. Good morning everyone. Welcome to the UA Sports Festival. Izuku said, pushing a little bit of voice into his throat. As I'm sure you're all aware, my class, 1A, was attacked by a group of villains a few weeks ago. We have been praised and hoisted up on laurels for a victory we did not earn alone. It was only thanks to our teachers that every student made it out of that catastrophe alive. The only difference between 1A and the rest of the first years is that we have all been scared out of our minds by these villains. Izuku paused to let everyone's thoughts catch up. However, as the old saying goes, an eye for an eye. Izuku smiled up at the teacher's seating area, specifically at the animalistic headmaster that stood up on his seat. Next time we face villains, we will be ready. I'm sure this festival can show both the villains and heroes watching that all of the first-year hero hopefuls, no matter the quirk, will be ready for anything thrown their way. Because we have learned. What didn't kill us only made us stronger. Plus ultra. Izuku left the stage, returning to his classmates. Midnight stepped back into her place at the front. Thank you Midoriya for that excellent speech. Now, I'm sure you're all waiting for the first event to be revealed. That event is going to be. The wheel spun around behind the heroine, rotating slower and slower until it stopped on an obstacle course. The obstacle course, the route you will take, leads out of the stadium and around the perimeter. The finish line is back through the same tunnel you start in. Everybody to your positions. Izuku pulled Sar out of his chest, as well as absolute authority, as he stepped forwards to the mouth of the tunnel. Todoroki is near the front. He'll probably go for an ice field to trap everyone. So I should wait for the moment. Midnight called the start of the event, and sure enough, Todoroki froze the floor to everyone's feet. Izuku broke the ice coating his shoes, activating his readied sword, and flying over the heads of everyone there. I'll deal with that copy after the event. He muttered, stashing half hot half cold away in his chest. And Shoto Todoroki freezes most of the competition right off the bat. Class 1A isn't fooled however, and the majority of them evade the trap. There was a moment of silence. Wo Izuku Midoriya uses his telekinesis quirk to fly above the competition. Got any info for us Izawa? Present Mick asks. Izawa sighed into the microphone. Izuku Midoriya. His quirk is called Absolute Authority. It's probably the strongest telekinesis quirk I've ever seen. His weight limit is unknown, and he doesn't seem to tire from using his quirk for long periods of time. Apparently he can use it to make himself fly as well as any flight quirk. President Mick was quick to announce the first obstacle as Todoroki reached it. And it looks like our frontrunner has reached the first obstacle, Robo Inferno. Izuku watched the ground shudder in a familiar way, and 6 zero-pointers emerge from the ground. Are these the robots from the entrance exam? The Hero Corps students had to fight these. Izuku sighed, lifting his hand and crumpling it into a fist. The zero-pointers floated into the air, pressing together, a sharp ear-piercing screeching, filling the course as the massive robots crushed each other, crumpling back onto the course as a near-perfect sphere of scrap metal. Looks like Izuku Midoriya wastes no time in removing the obstacle before him. Todoroki and the flying Midoriya are now competing for first place, just as they reach obstacle number 2, the fall. President Mick said. Todoroki slowed to a stop, examining the rope spanning the pit, while Izuku just flew across, looking down at the expanse of ropes and dirt pillars. The greenette raised his hand again, this time pushing it downwards. The pillars that spanned the fall crumbled, taking the snapped remains of the ropes with them. And once again, Izuku Midoriya is merciless in his takedown of the obstacle. He not only bypasses the trap entirely, but he blocks off most of his competitors' chances of making it across. What have you been teaching this kid, Izawa? Don't ask me, he came like that. You heard it here first, folks. Izawa is a terrible teacher, and it looks like Midoriya has bypassed the third and final obstacle, the minefield. In all honesty, we really should have considered flight when designing this. Looks like Cementus and Power Loader are terrible planners. Do you just like making fun of your coworkers? And look at that, Midoriya has completely finished the obstacle race. Shoto Todoroki has begun creating an ice bridge across the vast pit of the fall. Kitsuki Bakugo pays the whole no mind, using his explosions to blast himself across. Chaco Uraraka floats across the pit, using zero-gravity Momoyarozu. Once the rest of the students either reached the end of the course or gave up, Midnight was quick to step back onto the podium. Your next event will be. The wheels slowed to a stop. The cavalry battle. In teams of 3 or 4, you will carry one person on your shoulders as the rider. Each team will be given a headband. Each headband will have a point value on it. The point value on each headband depends on the placing each of your teammates made on the obstacle course. Only the first 42 will be chosen for this event. Midnight pointed to the display behind her. Now, 42nd place is worth 5 points. 41st is worth 10 points, and the next is 15 and so on. They all go up like this except for first place. The first place point value is worth 10 million. Izuku stared at the number on the display. 10 million. Midnight grinned down at the greenette. Battle and steal headbands from other teams, increase your score and make it into the final event. You have 10 minutes to form your teams, so go. Izuku sighed. Nobody wants to join the 10 million team. It makes more sense to steal it near the end, save your energy until that moment. That means I'll need to focus on running away. Midnight, can I go solo? He asked. The heroine looked surprised, then grinned. Izawa has just informed the rest of the staff about your unique standing. Very well. Izuku Midoriya will be working alone for this event. The rest of the competitors grinned. It would be even easier to steal the headband now. Nezu grinned. It just became impossible to steal the headband from Izuku's team. Izuku just accepted his headband from Midnight and sat cross-legged on the opposite side of the arena. Izuku closed his eyes and felt around himself, pulling his sensory and awareness quirks to the surface. He could show off. Just a little. He heard Midnight call go, and immediately every team charged for Izuku. The greenette sighed, raising his hand and lifting every other team off the ground. The competitors and audience alike gasped, amazed yet again at his show of strength. Lifting large inanimate objects was one thing, but a group of 41 people, all struggling against his hold, flailing their quirks around. That was impressive. Izuku set the other teams down on the opposite side of the arena. Most of them got the message, keeping their fighting to themselves. The few that did try charging him again were set back to the other side, minus their headbands. The unstoppable force that is Izuku Midoriya has shown exactly what he is capable of. How will the other teams act when faced by this incredible power gap? Izuku reached into himself, pulling various quirks to the surface. Explosive kinesis and hydrokinesis are compatible with half hot half cold. So if I push them together. Izuku smiled to himself, using absolute authority to push another team away and steal their headband. A new quirk. It's pretty much Todoroki's quirk upgraded to the maximum. Temperate fluctuation. Although, electrokinesis and resistance are compatible. Ah, what the hell. Star. Izuku pulled electrokinesis and resistance from his chest, pushing the three quirks into one. So I'm resistant to just about everything. I can control hot, cold, fire, water, ice, electricity, technology and explosions at will. I'll call it kinesis for now. Star. Shoto Todoroki goes for a daring attack. What will Midoriya do against such a massive blow? Present Mick screeched. Izuku opened his eyes, watching the ice stream across the ground, slowly rising as it traveled closer. Izuku concentrated on kinesis, manipulating the ice over his own head and back down the other side. As Midoriya been immobilized, the loud hero yelled. It doesn't matter if he's immobilized or not. Nothing can touch him while he's in the ice. Todoroki just secured Midoriya's victory. Aizawa droned. Time's up, Midnight shouted. Izuku stood, cracking the ice from around him, walking away from the arena. Izuku Midoriya takes first place in the cavalry battle, Midnight announced. Izuku gave his headbands back to Midnight and walked through the tunnel. He wandered through hallways and upstairs until he found the teacher's seating area. Nezu was already waiting for him. I think you slipped through my fingers so easily, he said. Izuku chuckled, leaning against a doorframe. Better luck next time, Enigma. So, what do you think? The other teachers watched curiously, knowing of both Izuku's quirks and his victory over Nezu. Nezu pulled the list from his waistcoat, unfolding the slip of paper. I'll need to update that often, Izuku muttered. As long as we have the name of the quirk, we shouldn't really need the number of copies and such. We already know they're powerful, Nezu said. Izuku nodded. I'll create a notebook in our emails, which I can update for you to see whenever. Nezu smiled, reading through the list. Well, from the way you didn't avoid Todoroki's attack, I assume you copied half hot half cold. And then you may have combined explosive kinesis and hydrokinesis with it. That way you can have it all as one quirk. Is it limited by half and half? Or can you do hot and cold from anywhere? Nezu asked. It's not limited by half and half. It just acts as an insulator so that the quirks can combine, but don't disrupt each other. Izuku formed flames with both hands, then let water drip from his fingers. I also added electrokinesis and resistance. The final product is called kinesis. However, I'm considering combining absolute authority and kinesis together. Nezu hummed thoughtfully, putting the list away. If you're worried about appearances, you don't have to worry. I'm sure you could pass off the combined quirk as a mutation of your original anyway. Izuku dipped his head in concentration. They're both big amalgamations. I can combine them, it'll probably become my strongest quirk. I can add zero gravity to it as well. And invisibility. Izuku opened his eyes and pulled his new quirk to the surface. Wow, that's a rush. Absolute kinesis or absolution? Nezu hummed. Absolution. Adding kinesis is slightly more suspicious and about 0.2% more likely to draw attention. But consider, we're passing it as a mutation. Where to go from absolute authority, the ultimate telekinesis but absolute kinesis? I'd say that alongside an explanation from both myself and maybe Aizawa, the danger drops to about 0.05. 0.02 if I'm the one giving the explanation. It is an unexpected mutation after all, it wouldn't be strange to see me talk about it. And as it's fire, water, ice, electricity and explosions, nobody will be suspicious of quirk theft. It's similar to Todoroki, Bakugo and Kaminari's quirks, but with a couple of major differences. Those three will be the most dangerous. Bakugo will be angry, Todoroki might be annoyed, and Kaminari will either call me his new brother or cry. There's about a 100% chance of being attacked by Bakugo. After much scheming and planning, Izuku returned to the arena, ready to use his newest quirk to the fullest. Izuku returned just in time for midnight to announce the next event. The final event will be a tournament. You will all fight each other in one-on-one battles until only one competitor remains at the top. Now, here are the brackets. Izuku looked at the screen. Midoriya vs Shinsu. Todoroki vs Zero. Iida vs Hatsume. Tokoyami vs Yaozu. Shiozaki vs Kaminari. Kirishima vs Tetsutetsu. Bakugo vs Uraraka. Izuku looked around. I don't know Shinsu. I wonder what course he's from. Gen Ed most likely. Hatsume is the only one with gear on. Maybe a mental quirk. Izuku was approached by a boy with wavy purple hair. Izuku Midoriya right? He asked. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Hitachi Shinsu. 15 minutes later, and Izuku was walking out of the tunnel and into the arena. On one side we have the dark horse of general education, the kid who's been sneaking up on the frontrunners the entire festival. Hitachi Shinsu. Shinsu stepped up onto the concrete arena, standing stock still just inside the border, a scowl on his face. On the other side we have the star of 1A, the strongest first year, Izuku Midoriya. Present Mick continued. Izuku stepped up onto the arena, taking his place inside the boundary line. Whoever submits is immobilized or pushed out of bounds as the loser. Are you both ready? Midnight asked. Both Izuku and Shinsu nodded wordlessly. Begin, she shouted. Shinsu spoke the moment the match was started. It must be great being born with a heroic quirk. How is it having everything served to you on a silver platter? Izuku raised his eyebrow. Being overly aggressive. Looking for a reaction. Verbal. Mental quirk, non-physical. Not useful against robots. Works on living things only. Verbally triggered mind control quirk. I assume you have a mind control quirk of some kind. Is it verbally activated? That seems incredibly useful. Shinsu looked shocked. How? Alright. Question needs to be directly answered. Offhand statements can dodge the effects. You know, I've run into a lot of villains with mind control quirks. Shinsu scowled. What are you? But I've also run into lots more muggers and villains with strength enhancers. Now the perplet just looked confused. You said earlier that I had a heroic quirk. Are you implying that your own is considered villainous? By that logic, All Might has a villainous quirk. Of course All Might's quirk isn't villainous, Shinsu spluttered. Why not? Izuku asked carefully. Well, because he's a hero. Izuku spread his arms wide, a grin on his face. Well then I don't think your mind control quirk could be considered villainous either. After all, you want to be a hero, don't you? Shinsu just seemed dazed. But it's brainwashing. How could it not be considered villainous? Izuku rolled his eyes. I'm a villain. I have a hostage with a knife to their throat. What do you do? Shinsu frowned. Why are you doing this? And then the villain monologues, losing control of himself and letting the hostage go free. Nobody gets hurt. The teen's eyes widen in realization and a small grin appears on his face. Izuku cackled. Now are you going to fight me or what? Izuku charged Shinsu, bringing his arms up to fight. The purple-haired teen stepped forwards, throwing a punch. Izuku caught the now and pled him forwards, throwing the tired boy off balance, sticking his leg out and tripping him. You need to train your body more. And learn how to fight properly. You can't just rely on your quirk all the time, cool as it may be. Izuku said. Shinsu got back up and attacked Izuku again, but was dodged, sending the insomniac out of bounds. Shinsu is out of bounds. Midoriya advances to the next round. Izuku helped his opponent stand up, both grinning at the other. We should train together sometime. I'd like to see how you progress with your quirk. We could spar too. Shinsu nodded. I'd like that. Izuku met Nezu in a random corridor, away from the crowds and prying ears. Itachi Shinsu. The greenette said. Nezu nodded. I know, he has incredible hero potential. I've been trying to change the entrance exams for years now. He's the first general education student to make it to the third round since Aizawa's first sports festival, I think. I hope you train him well with your little gift. He'll be joining you in class next semester. We will most likely put one Minoru Mineta into general education. Izuku chuckled. Figured it out, did you? I don't like using mind control quirks. If he's going to use it to its full potential, that's fine by me. Nezu grinned. Is there any chance you could do that for all of your classmates? Just with their own quirk copies, of course. Izuku nodded. Gradually, through the year. Once a week, for everyone, I'll copy their quirks and give the copy back. Just so that it's unnoticeable growth. I don't want to reveal it to anyone else just yet. That's fine. Oh, by the way, take my high specs. It's one of the strongest intelligence quirks in the world, even a copy should noticeably improve your own. Nezu said, reaching up and pinching Izuku's hand. Izuku pushed the copy into his own intelligence quirk. Wow, that is so much better than before. Izuku looked around the corridor, analyzing every tiny detail. High specs is not actually an intelligence quirk in the traditional sense. It more than quadruples the user's existing IQ, just improving on what's already there. So you, with your 20-odd intelligence quirks. Nezu said. Izuku frowned to himself, wandering down the corridor, following the small traces of flame along the ceiling. You are fortunate that the doctor had a copy of your quirk in his lab. However, we must be wary. If that child can indeed steal quirks, then Nomu and the villainous elite alike will be useless against him. A smooth, deep voice said. Yes, sensei. A scratchy voice responded. The shadowy figure leaned forwards in his chair, his respirator hissing as he gasped for oxygen. Izuku Midoriya. The general population of idiots may be fooled, but I am not. No matter the strength, a telekinesis quirk cannot make oneself fly so effortlessly. The deep voice mused. And the sheer strength of the telekinesis can only be due to quirk synergy. A behemoth quirk composed of many quirks merged into one. There is no doubt. Izuku Midoriya can steal quirks. He continued. The man seemed to come to a decision. Tamura. He said into his microphone. Gather the villainous elite. They may not be able to stand up to Midoriya, but they can at least deal with his pesky classmates and any other heroes. The doctor and I shall work on perfecting the ultimate Nomu just for him. Gather your strength until it is time for both the world and Izuku Midoriya will fear you. Izuku had watched his classmates' matches eagerly, ready to learn more about their and his quirks. Todoroki vs Zero had been quick. Todoroki merely froze his opponent in a single move. Iida vs Hatsume had been hilarious. Hatsume had convinced him to use her support gear and turned their match into an advertisement for her babies. Though Koyami vs Yaoyorozu had also been quick. The creative girl wasn't fast enough to stop the shadow monster from pushing her out of bounds. Shiozaki vs Kaminari had been yet another quick match where Kaminari let out all of his electricity at once, frying his brain. Shiozaki quickly immobilized him. Kirishima vs Tetsu was a long, drawn-out match. Izuku missed most of it as he went to the waiting room to support Uraraka before her upcoming match. Uraraka vs Bakugo was a long match. The brunette had kept close to the ground, making Bakugo's explosions dislodge chunks of concrete that she levitated into the sky. The meteor shower that she let fall was a spectacular attack, however it was not well matched against the loud blonde. Bakugo took out her attack in one blast, blowing the brunette away and knocking her out shortly after. Izuku left the waiting room, his expression becoming downcast as he heard quiet crying. The greenette rounded the corner, coming face to face with a man wreathed in flames. "Ah, it's you. Your quirk is impressive. I expect you to put on a good show for Shoto. That boy has a duty to surpass All Might." Izuku watched the giant man walk away. "Is that why he refuses to use his fire side?" he asked. Endeavor turned around. "Yes. He's having a childish rebellion at the moment, but..." "How dare you?" Izuku's voice shook. Endeavor's glare hardened. "Excuse me?" he asked. "How dare you?" Izuku repeated. "How dare you drag your son into your one-sided feud with All Might? How dare you treat your son like a tool? How dare you walk around acting like a hero when you don't even qualify to be a human being?" Izuku said. Endeavor flared up. "Don't you talk to me like that, boy." Izuku felt the searing heat on his face. He smiled devilishly. "An eye for an eye, Endeavor. And you've done so much more than take an eye." Izuku copied Endeavor's quirk, then swapped it for the original. The flames died down, but the hero didn't notice, calming them himself anyway. Izuku then copied the copy he had given the hero, swapping the sub-copy for the copy within Endeavor. Izuku did that a total of 19 more times. Endeavor ended up with a SUP times 20 copy quirk, while Izuku had the original quirk and 20 other copies of decreasing power. The hero did not notice. He had enough firepower to light up his costume and ignite his flamastake, but not an inch more. The flames looked great, but they didn't do all that much. Later, Candlehead. Enjoy your new career of melting wax and scenting rooms. Izuku left quickly, enjoying the distant screeches of rage when Endeavor couldn't flare up in fury. "No takes Ibaxies," Izuku sang, pushing Halflam and the 20 copies into absolution. Izuku walked up onto the concrete arena, facing his opponent. Now that he knew just how disgusting the number 2 trash bag really was, Izuku could see signs he couldn't before. Todoroki's eyes remained steady, but the moment you looked away they shifted to the side, looking for threats. The decorational fire that flared at the corners of the arena made Todoroki's fists clench every time they spluttered. An unnoticeable ribbon of smoke was curling from the heterochromia teen's right shoulder. His eyesight had been burned. Todoroki was discreetly frosting over the burn, the ice only slightly creeping below his sleeve. Izuku scowled. He'd get Todoroki to use his fire, even if it killed him, just so that he could rub Todoroki's success in Endeavor's crippled face. "Are you both ready?" Midnight asked. Izuku and Todoroki nodded wordlessly. "Then you may begin." Todoroki's first move was to engulf Izuku in ice. Izuku heated up his body enough to melt the ice and walk through it, punching the final layer and stepping back onto concrete. "The same move that you used against Zero. You should know that won't work on me." Todoroki sent another ice wave at him. Izuku just gestured with his hand, and the wave split down the middle, passing either side of Izuku. "Why aren't you using your fire?" Izuku called. "Is it because of what that trash did to you?" Todoroki scowled. "I refuse to use his power," he said. Izuku shook his head. "Am I fighting Endiahor with Halflam?" "No. I'm fighting Shoto Todoroki with half cold half hot," he said. Todoroki wordlessly sent out another ice barrage that was redirected by Izuku again. "Everyone here is giving it 100%, so why aren't you? All of our classmates are giving it, they're all just to crawl through, and you're just half-assing it." Todoroki scowled. "I will not use his fire," he said, launching another iceberg at his opponent. "I know you won't because it's your fire. And also because Endeavor is just a light show now. But other than that, it's your power. yours, not his. Todoroki froze in place, and Izuku took a few steps away. The dual-haired teen burst into flames, the heat sweeping across the arena. Helping your opponent? You're crazy. Todoroki muttered. Izuku grinned at his creation, cackling as he anticipated the next blow. Todoroki stomped his foot down, gathering ice. You'll need to tell me what you meant by light SHKW later. In the meantime, the mountain of ice was thrown at Izuku and promptly redirected. A torrent of flame engulfed the teen, but was redirected with absolution, rising high above Izuku's head as he sprinted towards his opponent. Todoroki stretched his arm out, gathering flames for one final burst. Izuku raised his own arm, reaching out for a high five from his opponent. They met in the middle with a resounding clap, too fast for both Midnight and Cementus to stop. Izuku gently dropped Todoroki out of bounds before the smoke cleared, standing in the center of the arena. He examined his right arm. Izuku's right arm up to his elbow had been obliterated. Fortunately, he'd gotten his regeneration quirk prepared, and his arm fixed itself in an instant. Midnight called out the verdict once the smoke cleared. Todoroki is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. The next few matches passed in a blur for Izuku. Bakugo, Iida and Tokoyami each won their matches in quick succession. Izuku then faced Iida, who was quickly dodged and pushed out of bounds. You need to work on stopping quickly, Izuku advised. Iida nodded thankfully, taking Izuku's hand and getting hauled to his feet. Bakugo defeated Tokoyami in seconds, the light from his explosions weakening the sentient quirk user. Tokoyami conceded the match. It was now time for the final match of the sports festival. And now, ladies, gentlemen and octopuses alike, the moment you've all been waiting for. He's strong, he's fast, he's explosive. Katsuki Bakugo enters the arena, Present Mick screamed. And in the other corner, he's barely lifted a finger so far. Will his final opponent draw out his true strength, or will he be curb stomped like all the others? The telekinetic overlord, Izuku Midoriya, he continued. Bakugo glared at Izuku from across the arena, his palms crackling. Izuku stared impassively at the blonde. Are you both ready? Midnight asked. Bakugo growled a yes, while Izuku nodded cheerfully. Begin, she said. Bakugo lifted his arms behind himself and blasted off, reaching his right arm forwards. Izuku stepped to the side and activated optics. Fun fact, when quirks are combined, due to there being so many abilities and combinations, most quirk tells are cancelled out. For example, the floating hair when using erasure. Izuku saw the exact moment Bakugo realized he was unable to blast away from the edge of the arena. An eye for an eye, Bakugo. To the crowd, it looked like Bakugo just gave up and blasted himself out of bounds. Izuku bowed to his opponent, briskly exiting the silent arena and chuckling quietly to himself as he entered the tunnel. The Bakugo is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. Midnight said in disbelief. Present Mick was just staring down at the arena, his jaw hanging open. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his hand down his face. Of course he used erasure just to piss Bakugo off. Of course. And the kid probably doesn't even know what happened, just he couldn't use his quirk. Star. Once everyone had collected themselves, the heroes prepared the podiums, as well as the medals. Izuku stood on first place, Bakugo was restrained to second, and Tokoyami stood on third. Iida had to leave due to a family emergency. However, he will still receive his medal at a later date. Midnight said. Izuku glanced momentarily at Bakugo, chained to the second place podium. The blonde lunged at Izuku, screeching into his gag. How monstrous. Tokoyami muttered. And now, here to award the medals. The booming laugh filled the arena. Is All Might, Midnight announced. All Might landed before the podiums, leaving not even a crack in the floor. I am here, he said. The hero stood up straight, taking the medals from Midnight and turning to Tokoyami. The hero said a few words and hung the medal around the bird boy's neck. He then hugged the teen, patting his back. Bakugo was next. This is a bit much. He chuckled, unclasping the gag. Well done on second place, Bakugo. He congratulated. The blonde responded with a string of curses and screams. All Might gagged the boy with the medal this time, his smile never wavering. And now, young Midoriya. Congratulations on getting first place. I'm amazed at your strength, as well as your quick wit and determination. The hero hung a big golden medal around Izuku's neck, then leaned in to hug the greenet. I wish to speak with you later, Midoriya. The hero said quietly. Please come to the staff room when you are able. All Might turned back to the crowd while Izuku's mind spun. What did All Might want? It could only be about his quirk. Was he afraid or merely curious? Izuku's eyes widened by the slightest margin. Ah, that was it. Izuku walked into the staff room, his quirks on high alert. He was greeted by both All Might, Nezu and Aizawa. Young Midoriya, thank you for coming. All Might greeted. Izuku nodded to the hero, taking a seat. I have asked you to be here at All Might's request. I'm sure you've figured out why. Izuku nodded, lacing his fingers together. All for one. My quirk is a superior version to his own, so All Might was worried. The hero in question spluttered, while Izawa's eyes narrowed. Who is that? Why am I just hearing about this? He asked. Nezu chuckled, handing Izuku a cup of tea. All for one is the oldest, most dangerous villain of all time. All Might believed he had defeated him, however it seems, due to recent events, that he is in fact alive. All Might coughed up blood this time. Alive? He asked. Izuku nodded. At the USJ. The Nomu creature had multiple quirks. Regeneration. Super speed. Shock displacement. Super strength. He was as strong as yourself, All Might, without a doubt. I decided to go deeper into the rabbit hole and found a bunch of rumors and bedtime tales about All for One, the boogeyman that steals quirks from bad children. All Might sighed, slumping back into his chair. If he really has regained his strength, I will not be able to defeat him, he admitted. Izuku shook his head. I think you'd have a good chance, even if you were on your own. Since your fight with him 5 years ago, the number of powerful quirk users disappearing have very slowly increased from nothing. Even now, the reports are at less than half the number they were before. He's weakened at the very least. Crippled at the most. All Might became a little hopeful. Perhaps they really would stand a chance. Nezu leaned forwards. So Bunny, we have been told of your various quirks and powers, but we have not seen many of them in action. I'd like to test just how far your limits reach. Izuku chuckled. I doubt even All Might in his prime could make me reach my limit. The sheer amount of strength enhancers and shock nullification quirks I have is ridiculous. Izawa sighed, getting out of his seat. Even so, I'd like to see you going all out, he said, walking to the door. Izuku and the other teachers stood, following the erasure hero to the field outside. The rest of the heroes were stood waiting for them. This the kid with the copy quirk? Vlad King asked. Nezu nodded from Izuku's shoulder, hopping onto the ground. Now, Midoriya here is going to demonstrate his full strength to you all. Should another incident like the USJ occur, this will let you rely on him with a clear conscience. Midoriya, if you please. Izuku stepped into the middle of the field, a fair distance from the teachers. Could you punch me full force, All Might? When the various tests and shows of strength were finished, Izuku returned to the teachers. I think that's everything. Oh, and I'll probably get more quirks in the future, so my strength will increase. All Might was cradling his smarting fist, while the rest of the teachers stared at Izuku in amazement. We sure are lucky the kid wants to be a hero. Snipe commented. Nezu looked over at All Might, who nodded. The Chimera herded the heroes away with the promise of tea and refreshments. Izawa remained behind. Young Midoriya, why do you want to be a hero? He asked. Izuku scratched his chin. I just want to help people. I was blessed with a powerful quirk and I work to make it even stronger. I want to help people with a smile on my face, like you. Izuku smiled. All Might chuckled, crossing his arms. Very well. Nezu, I've made my decision. Nezu had returned alone and was grinning at Izuku. Excellent. I recommend we tell Izawa, as he is the boy's teacher. All Might nodded, while both Izuku and Izawa frowned. Tell me him what? One for all. Izuku hummed, thinking for a moment. The antithesis to All for One. The name of your quirk. Izuku's head whipped around to All Might. You can pass your quirk along. That explains your strength. It's a strength stockpile that can be passed on. But how? If it's All for One's antithesis, then it must have originated close to him. A son? Izuku asked. All Might sighed. I really shouldn't be surprised at this point. Yes, One for All can be passed on from person to person. It originated within All for One's younger brother. The villain forced a stockpile quirk onto him and it merged with his unknown quirk to pass on quirks. I am the 8th wielder and I'd like you to be the 9th. Izuku thought for a second. All for One has been amassing strength. I'm the perfect counter to him. I'll have an All for One variant and One for All. Izawa stood staring at the principal and number 1 hero like they were idiots. Do you want to give the quirk factory even more power? He asked. All Might's expression grew serious. All for One was stronger than even this when I faced him last. It's been 5 years and he has amassed even more power in that time. Even with One for All, I don't know if young Midoriya could defeat him. I of course will try, but it will be difficult. Izuku nodded. I accept. However, could you punch me again please? Izuku asked. All Might pulled a strange expression. Why? He asked. I want to copy the base function and then merge it with the original. If I do that twice, then the strength accumulation should become twice as fast as before. All Might sighed, flicking Izuku's forehead twice in quick succession. Izuku felt around inside his chest. I can feel it building energy already. This is amazing. He said. All Might almost fainted on the spot. Be duplicated one for all. He muttered. Izuku's eyes lit up. I've just had the best idea ever. 5 minutes later and Izuku had swallowed a piece of hair, much to Nezu's amusement. All Might possessed a copy of One for All, which the embers of the original had immediately latched onto and kick-started. Izuku needed to wait an hour or two, but he would soon possess the original One for All, with all of its strength. Izuku frowned, examining the hero. You favor your left side. An injury from All for One. All Might sighed, nodding his head. Show me. Izuku said. All Might pulled his suit and button-up shirt aside, revealing the cavity and scar. Izuku raised his hand, glowing blue. I have the most powerful healing quirk in existence. Do you want me to try? He asked. Nezu and Izawa watched on with interest. It's worth a try, my boy, the hero said. Izuku placed his hand on All Might's side. Left lung, your stomach, a rib and a bunch of muscle is missing. Ha, this is nothing. The deep cavity in the hero's side slowly filled out. Lung is essential. That's done. Stomach next. The hole in All Might's side slowly regained a healthy skin color rather than the angry red and purple. Stomach done. There is little I can do about the rib, you need more calcium. I can heal it at a later date, just drink more milk for a week or something. Muscles are also done. Nerve endings and blood vessels fixed. Dead cells removed and regenerated. There was also a hairline fracture in your next rib up, reaching a little onto your spine. I fixed that. Your fist is all fixed too, as well as the fractures in your right foot and collarbone. Seriously, what were you doing this morning? Izuku said. All Might poked at his side. It doesn't hurt. He took a deep breath. And I can breathe. The only disfigurement remaining on the hero was the slight cavity where his rib was supposed to be. Nezu clapped, while Izawa sighed, irritated at himself for being surprised anymore. Izuku yawned, examining the hero. Alright. As long as you have enough calcium, I should be able to fix your rib on Wednesday. You're back in your prime, All Might. He smiled. The hero laughed freely for the first time in years, buttoning his shirt back up. Thank you, young Midoriya. With this, we may stand a chance against All for One. I feel as though I could work for days at a time. Izawa stepped towards Izuku. Tomorrow you and I will be training One for All. I don't trust All Might to not break your hand every time you use it. Izuku nodded, following his teachers back to the main building. It was an hour later when he felt the immense power surge beneath his skin. Izuku leapt from the side of the building, across the street and to the next one. Green electricity crackled around him. One for all. 42%. He muttered. Izuku bounced between the buildings, springing from wall to wall with immense speed. Izuku laughed, feeling the rush of energy through his veins. The green net pulled his speed and strength quirks to the surface, feeling himself accelerate to a ridiculous pace. Not even a crack was left on the buildings, and Izuku was only a green streak of lightning to Izawa's eyes. The tired pro's eyes followed the lightning that was left behind his student. Midoriya, that's enough for now. Izuku skidded to a stop before his teacher a second later, letting his quirk sink back into his chest. One for all is amazing. Plus the energy accumulation is so fast, it'll take me about 20 years to double my power. All Might has been active for 43 years, and his average strength doubled in that time. Izawa patted his student's shoulder. Well, school starts back up tomorrow, so you've done well. I'll overlook the 2 weeks extra off from Nezu this time, as it allowed us to train your new power. Next time I won't be so forgiving. Izuku grimaced under Izawa's glare. Sorry, Mr. Izawa. It's fine, kid. I'm just glad I got extra sleep out of it. Now, go home and sleep. Or don't, I don't care. You're getting an important announcement tomorrow. Izuku nodded, leaving ground beta and walking beside Izawa back to the main building. How has Shinsu been doing? Does he like his quirk? Izuku asked. He's been doing well. He picked up the basics of the capture gear well, and he's been bulking up since the festival. His quirk mutated. Izawa glanced pointedly at Izuku. Now he can brainwash with questions, touch or eye contact. If he uses a pair of goggles like you, then the eye contact can become a secret weapon. A last resort, if you will. What's his capacity? About 4 or 5 people before getting a headache. He's working on getting it to 5 or 6. Izuku smiled. I'm glad he's doing well. He'll be an incredible hero. Izuku separated from his mentor, waving goodbye. The hero frowned with his eyes, hiding the small smile behind his scarf, waving his hand in a dismissive gesture. You need to choose hero names. Izawa said in his monotone voice. 1A cheered. Hero names? I've had mine picked for years. Kiro. I haven't thought about it that much. Izawa got into his sleeping bag. I'm unqualified for this, so I've gotten someone to help you choose. Midnight burst through the door with a smile. I will be the one to approve your hero names. Now, take a whiteboard and pen and get to work. You have 10 minutes to decide. Izuku accepted his whiteboard from a straight-faced Iida. A name? I was going to choose the name of my real quirk. But now that I've got one for all, I'm not so sure. Or I could go with Absolution. Sacrificer. Izuku's classmates all went to the front of the class one after the other, all coming up with good hero names. Pinky, Froppy, Creati, Uravity, Tentacle, Red Riot, Chargeable, Grape Juice Earphone Jack, Tuskayomi, Invisible Girl, Sugar Rush, Can't Stop Twinkling, Tailman, Anima and Cellophane. Bakugo had been refused twice, both King Explosion Murder and Lord Explosion Murder rejected by midnight. Iida, stony-faced as before, just used his given name, Tenya. Todoroki did the same, going with Shoto. Alright, Midoriya, you're the last one. Bakugo, you'll just be Bakugo until you think of a better name. Midnight said. Izuku walked up to the front, placing his whiteboard down, facing the class. His classmates looked on confused, Midnight a little less so, while Izawa grinned beneath his scarf. Eye for all. The Rebond hero. Izuku grinned with a touch of logical ruse in his smile. I don't get it, Kaminari said. What kind of shitty name is that, Deku? Bakugo asked. It sounds manly, Kirishima asked. Izuku caught Izawa's eye and the underground hero smirked, nodding at the name. Once Midnight had left, Izawa took his place at the front once again. The reason you have chosen codenames is because of the upcoming internships. You have all received offers from hero agencies that want to take you on and show you the ropes. For 1 week, you will be working as real heroes, alongside pros. Izawa pressed a button and the screen behind him lit up. Izuku had the largest number of offers due to his immense show of strength during the festival. 3,482, he muttered. Damn Midoriya, you got a lot of offers. The difference is so obvious. Izawa cleared his throat, gaining his students' attention once again. You will need to choose an agency or hero from your list by the end of the week. Anyone who did not receive any offers, UA has some pre-listed agencies for you to choose from. Izuku glanced down at his offer list, his eyes widening as his gaze passed over the names at the top of the page. 4 of the top 10 heroes had sent him offers. Endeavor, Edshot, Ryukyu and Maruko. Izuku was stopped from leaving 1A by All Might in a bizarre position. Young Midoriya. I have something to speak with you about, he said. Izuku told Uraraka to go on without him and followed his mentor to a secluded corner. You have received another offer. A hero named G. Gran Torino. Well, that's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.